I love that.
Yeah.
So, dating, how do women disqualify themselves from men?
Uh, huh,
I know
which
it's
men?
men. Like, do we say simp men? Do we see men that are high value, quote unquote? 100K a year, 150K a year?
I think these are good broad categories, and there are some truths. But when we're talking about things as like precise as like red flags to a group, it's pretty hard. Like, I guess the main red flag women can have to men is like not being physically attractive to them, because that's like the main marker that men look for. But it's not even like a red flag. It's more just like if you don't hit a certain threshold of attraction that he's kind of looking for. And men seem to have a pretty like wide open range of what they're attracted to. It's just you've got to meet that threshold. Then like you're kind of golden. And then beyond that, there's going to be like, I think this is the issue when we talk about like high value men. We're really talking about like a pretty niche group of men. And what they're going to see as red flags in a relationship is going to be totally different, for example, than like men that are like, I come from academic land. Like I hang out with men in humanities who study like psychology and like philosophy. And red flags to these men are totally different than like the high value men or like men who do like club promotions and stuff like that. Like there's just very different cultures. And so when we're targeting our advice for like dating, I think there's some generalities that we can talk about, and then I think a lot of it actually has to be like niched, because I think so often we take like a niche group and then we essentialize it to everyone else, and it's like that's not really true. If you look at like Jewish Orthodox dating, it's super weird, and nobody else does what they do, but that's like standard. If you look at like fundamentalist white Christian land, our style of dating is weird. Red flags in fundamentalist Christian land is not red flags in most of the world, right? And so, yeah, other than being unattractive, I think, like, I don't know what women can do. Don't be like mentally ill. That seems to be something that like, I want to say turns guys off, but actually a lot of guys seem to like that for a while and then they get tired of it. They're like, it's kind of fun, but now it's not so fun. So I don't know.
Yeah. So, you talk about in your area of field, right? What are some of the red flags that come up in that area that maybe cross over into the world of just like working regular 9 to 5, making 50, 60K a year, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of men in like school and education, they're often looking for a woman who's also educated, which works out because a lot of women are educated. I mean, women are more educated on average. So a lot of educated men are often looking for similarly educated women, particularly men in the humanities, because men in the humanities tend to be left-leaning as well. So they're more so looking for like an equal partner. And so they're oftentimes looking for a girl who's like quite smart, but obviously this is the one general I said, but he still finds attractive, right? So a red flag to him would be a girl like who, like you ask her, what day is it today? And she says it's Thanksgiving instead of Valentine's. That could be a red flag to him, for example, like I did at the beginning of this. Or like if you like ask them like name three cities in the world, and they like can't name 3 cities, right? That would be like they'd be like, ooh, like uh-oh. But
Where did they get that from? 3 cities in the world.
I
Guys
just
down,
thought of something.
those guys down in Miami, eh?
Oh yeah, I think that's a classic fresh and fit question, right? Name 3 cities or something like that. I mean, it's embarrassing. I mean, if you can't do it, that's embarrassing for me. But it's like, I don't know, that's my world as well. Like I like pride myself in intellectualism to some degree. So
No, we're
I
in
couldn't name
Canada,
three
so
cities.
we can maybe name 3 provinces at least. Maybe that should be the spin-off question.
True. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting. So academic land, I think looks is a good thing to generalize to all men. They want a woman who they're attracted to, but what does attracted to mean? It's pretty broad. For the most part, it seems to be markers of youthfulness, like cleaner skin, some rosy cheeks. There's a reason why we like do our makeup in certain ways. Pretty decently symmetrical face. Typically, most men, not all men, but a lot of men are into like more hyper feminine traits. So like big titty, big ass, stuff like that. And then you're going to get these niche populations where like some men in like certain populations are going to be like super, super into like much more like overweight. Like there's certain cultures where like women being really, really overweight is like super prized. And so men like desperately pursue like the most obese women. And they're like, women are shamed in that culture if they're like not plus 250, right? Which is just like so foreign to us. So yeah. Whatever it is, the
Yeah.
marker of attraction is what men are looking for.
And I think there's a lot of pressures. I think there's a lot of things that I always like to say, especially on this podcast, like the society and control and all the things that women have to be up against, right? If it's not social media, Instagram, you name it, you know, models from OnlyFans. It's like a wild, wild west in this dating game. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like personally, me, I'm not going to date somebody that's behind a paywall and is doing some things on OnlyFans that make me wonder. You know what I mean? I don't feel like that's somebody that has value is not going to really go for that versus somebody that maybe has maybe a smaller channel like yourself, like you're doing your thing, you're a streamer, you say you're married, you're saying things like that. So when you think about dating going to leading into long-term LTR relationships to marriage, I feel like it's about picking your poison of what it is you want, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the nuance that's missing so often in the conversation. It's like, what's going to complement you specifically, right? There's some generalities we can make. I can make tons of generalities about broadly what women look for in men, which is like markers of stability and some level of like bare minimum attraction and stuff like that. But it's like, the reality is like a lot of this when you, like, it's not practical because I can tell you like normative statistics, but the problem is that like that doesn't apply super well to the individual. Like what works really well for me doesn't work super well for probably a lot of women. Like I'm a woman who's very, very career driven, and I've been like fixated on a path as far as like in clinical psychology that I knew I needed a guy that was willing to somewhat accommodate my career schedule, which I know is not most men. So I knew I'm already canceling out a large portion of this. I think the reality is that you have to know what you want and then be realistic about the more limits you set, the more narrow net you cast. And so if you're single for longer, you can't complain. And if you don't want to be single, you have to widen your net. And I think that's an issue for like particularly women. Like a lot of women aren't kind of communicated to this of like, you can have super high standards. Go off, sis. Just realize most people don't meet that. And if you aren't the type of person who would attract those people, you're going to be single for a really, really long time. And you could do that. That's fine. But that's the trade-off of having a narrow net.
I like that expression you use, narrow net, right? And just really tuning into a lot of your content. Your talking pieces and monologues are next level, right? And anybody that's listening to this, really go check you out, check your channel, be on the show notes and description. I think one of the things is about the net. What is one thing you can give the audience, the women listeners that are listening right now, that they should really focus on when it's coming down to finding that right man that they're wanting to date and make some sort of correlation with to lead to something that's going to be long-term? Because I feel like everybody wants to be in somewhat of a long-term relationship. It doesn't have to necessarily be marriage. Maybe
Right.
It doesn't turn out to be kids, but what's that one thing?
I don't know if I think find your foundations, like your foundational priorities that are immutable, right? Like things where you're like, I don't think this relationship would work for me at all if this didn't exist. I'm going to guess, Stacy, eye color's not it, right? Whether he's got blue, green, or black, or like brown eyes or black eyes or whatever, I'm going to guess that that's not actually going to be the balance of whether your relationship works out, right? Like pick your foundations and make them really, really matter, right? Probably him being over 6 foot is not the best foundation to select. My partner is slightly shorter than me, and I am so glad that I didn't care about height because I have an incredible partner that like it's such a silly, arbitrary thing to have. So like pick your priorities and really make them matter, and make sure that if you've picked them, that they're the only thing that matters, which means you hold yourself to it. If you say, I need a guy who is going to be bringing in the majority of the income and is career driven, and you meet a guy that you really like who's none of those things, and you've already decided for sure, then you shouldn't be with him and you should walk away. Unless you were wrong the whole time, right? So like I knew what my priorities were. I picked them pretty early on, and it was like 3 things. And I was very like, if somebody didn't qualify for that, it didn't matter how I felt. I was like, this isn't going to work out long term. And I'm not big in leading people on, so I would just like end the relationship.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
No, you say a lot of powerful things there, you know. That whole height situation. I feel like when I was in my early 20s, it was never a thing. Like
No.
coming from a sports background on both sides of my family.
Yeah.
My grandfather was almost 6'5", 6'6", right?
Yeah.
So I have Caribbean background, Jamaican, right? And it's
Okay.
like he used to play cricket. Never used to play basketball and stuff like that. So it's like, when did height ever become a thing? I think for me personally, like you got to have a certain height requirement. Like I can't do 5 foot because my lower back is not going to be nice. You know what I mean? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's like, why is height such a big thing?
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if just like our population is thinking less well than it did in the past, or maybe it's just like because we have so many more options. Like, it's kind of like that paradox of like because I have like unlimited options, I get like frozen by it. So I just like pick dumb shit and I go with it. I don't know if it's just like a heuristic or a fad. It feels kind of fatty. There's some mapping on, right? Like I think to some extent, like women want to feel protected and like smaller in the relationship.
Teddy
Typically.
bear effect.
Yeah, a little bit, right? And specifically, I think what it is they want to feel safe. They want to feel protected, right? So if like you're a woman and you're dating a guy who's like 6 inches smaller than you, he's like rail thin and he's like afraid of the dark, you're not really going to feel protected by him. Typically, some women will still go for that, and great for them. But on average, most women want a guy that makes them feel protected. And I think height is like this like short, fast thinking that women use to be like, tall guy must be protective, he has big space energy, like he takes up space, and it's like sure, but like, who do you want? Like 6 foot guy who's just played music his whole life, or like a 5'6" guy who's like an MMA trained like fighter, right? The 5'6" guy is actually gonna like keep you safer and make you feel more protected. And I think like a lot of this is like a shorthand for kind of the energies. I've noticed like tall men often give off an energy. Like I call it tall man energy. Height is a mindset, right? A lot of tall men enter a space and they occupy their own space and they emanate like, I own the space, it's mine, and like nobody's going to move me around from it. And probably in part because we kind of socialize them to that. They are a little bit larger, so it like cues our visual center. But like, this is something I've noticed. Every single girl and guy that meets my husband, who's 5'6.5", always thinks that he's tall. They're always like, no, you're for sure way taller than me, while they're standing next to him. And he's, yeah, but your husband's like way taller than you. I'm like, no, he's not. I'm taller than him. What do you mean? Like there's an energy, I think, that like you can communicate. And I think a lot of short men buy into the heuristic, and so they like shrink themselves, so they give off like short man energy. But I like the more and more I watch Nick in the world, like interacting, like we'll be out with like we could be out with a guy who's like 6'8", and like Nick will like own the space in a way that the other guy doesn't, that everyone seems to gravitate. Girls seem a lot more interested, in a way that just like, I'm just convinced that like height is a mindset, more than it is anything else.
It's so true because I go out a lot, and I'm 6'4", right? Athletically built. And you see a lot of these short guys walking around, and some of them are like, in their, like, they feel like they're in like their Franklin turtle shell, right? Mm-hmm. And I even see the same thing with guys that are like over 6 foot tall. And I'm like, what's going on right now in the world? Is there something I'm missing? Yeah. And it's just like, I feel like you got to pick your poison. I've always been a big component of when you're out, just know how to keep your how do I say it, masculine frame, right? Mm-hmm. Know how to keep your frame as a man and just be who it is you're going to be, right? You don't have to slouch over. You don't have to be all, dainty and things like that, whatever, different strokes for different folks. But if you're wanting to like oppose some traits of maybe wanting to see that girl and you want to talk to her and you want to buy her a drink, I'm kind of against that a little bit, but do it with conviction. Why do you think men don't bring that oomph with inside of them, making that transition?
I don't know how they can. If you're like a 5'6" guy, your dad backed out on your mom has had to work like 50 to 60-hour work weeks to just keep food on the table, right? Maybe you've always been kind of short and small, so you've been like talked down to, you've been bullied, you don't have good male role models. You've been told by a bunch of girls that you're short, so that's bad. Like I don't know how you just magically cultivate that in yourself. You can't, which is why like I always like I try to say like I stand like short kings. Like I feel for short guys. It sucks, right? As much as I'm saying like height is a mindset, like I'm in psych. Mindsets aren't just like magically cultivated. It takes a lot of work. It's really hard, and it has to like you're basically cultivating a mindset that defies like your reality to some extent. And I'm not saying that like men should delude themselves or anything, but I think in a lot of ways, like I don't know how men would cultivate this sense, because like even the male role models we have for most men are like shells of masculinity. They think that basically being afraid of feminine things or anything that appears like gay is like masculine. So they're like, I always like make jokes like I'm worried sometimes these guys are like afraid to like wipe their own butts in fear that like if their finger gets gay, right? And it's just like, that's not masculinity in the way that like it should mean. Because I think like masculinity and femininity can kind of mean whatever society wants it to mean to some extent. I think there's some limitations, right? But right now we've cultivated like such a shell of what that, right? When I look at like the fresh and fit types and whatnot, it's such a empty version of masculinity that's so easily shattered that it's like, this isn't really masculinity. This is a cope. It's just a mask. And so when we're talking about like cultivating this mindset, how do they do this? Where do they even look to do this? I don't know.
Where do you think men should look for those role models? I don't think it's a question that's asked a lot. I know there's some guys out there that I look to, that I could say, like, me as a masculine male, I may dabble in some of their talking points. Jordan Peterson's one. But when you look at Jordan Peterson, a lot of people are going to say, well, he's kind of like the Kevin Samuels, rest in peace, Kevin Samuels type of thing, right? Same type of frame, great, educated, good talking points. But where do you think men should be looking towards the masculine role models if, say, they didn't grow up with a dad, they didn't have an uncle, things like that?
Yeah, there's not a ton. I'm trying to find a list. Keanu Reeves is pretty cool. But I don't know if many young men are going to look at like Keanu Reeves anymore. Because the issue is he can't just be a good male. He has to be a guy who captures the mind of like a 12-year-old boy, right? Which is why I think like the size, what you talk about, like this muscularity, I think that's part of it for a lot of young boys. It's like they don't just want to be like, oh, I'm an intellectual hero, which is based, by the way. But that's a lot more of like a mature adult thing. I think people come to appreciate like the Kevin Samuels, the intellectual like warrior type energy as you get older, because you come to value it. Whereas kids are shallow and dumb, right? So like kids value like big muscles, look like hero. I'm not sure. I wish I had a really good answer.
I think there's some guys like, I don't really want to say, well, let's go wake it up. You know, I know he got a lot of bad rap. I think a lot of it's staged. We're going to say his name, AT. That's the acronym we're just going to put there. And I think that a lot of the young men looked at that as a hero, but he did say some questionable things.
The issue is he was empty. Like, Andrew Tate conned women. Andrew Tate conned men more than women. That's the tragic thing. Like, a lot of these young boys are greater victims of Andrew Tate. Interesting take. Yeah.
Holy.
Because here's the thing. If all of his public pieces were lies and he wasn't doing this, and all of his business advice, everything that he said that's like actual grooming of women was a lie, then that means your hero was lying to you the entire time. And if he wasn't lying, then he was the bad guy the whole time, because men who like take advantage of women aren't good men. That's not respect worthy, right? And so like, this is the issue with Andrew Tate is if he was lying, everything that he said publicly wasn't true, okay, but then maybe he's not guilty of the crimes. But now he's been a liar to all of his fans the whole time. That's not a man that you look up to.
Well said. Never, like, out of all the influencers, YouTubers, never heard that perspective. Honestly, I'm not going to put cap on that. Like, I've never heard that perspective.
Nuance. It's my thing.
The thing is you say it, lying to the young men. You know?
Exactly. Right? Like, telling young men that conning people, like when I looked at it, because I'm basing this on his words, right? Not like the way the media portrays him. I'm talking about like Hustlers University videos that were leaked, right? I don't know if you remember. Have you seen them?
Of course. I mean, I'm in this space. I gotta do what I gotta do, right? Talking about all of Tate's stuff.
Yeah. So the one video that really struck me is, remember that piece of advice that he gives where he says, he was selling advertising, and he says, get a client, and once they buy in, so they're willing to buy like a $2,000 advertising program from you, take that money and then email them back and go, look, now's not the right time. I really want to make sure that we treat you as best as we can, and send them their money back. And then email them 3 weeks later and say, now's the time, but the same package that I was going to sell you, it's $3,500 more. He's like, every single time that person will buy from you. And he's right. He's right that they will, because what he's doing is he's cultivating a false sense of trust. The problem is that's a con, because he doesn't say, actually wait for a better time for your clients. He says, make it up like there's a better time for your clients so you can get more money from them that they would have never spent on you, and cultivate a false sense of trust. That's lying. That's bad. I don't want young men learning this.
And that's where I feel like we can both agree. And I get in a lot of talking points with a lot of guys. I don't think a lot of it is the misogynistic views that people want to label, the mainstream wants to label. I think a lot of it has to, because I use both sides of my brain. And I go, okay, Kevin Samuels was saying the exact same thing. Maybe not the type of tonality and the delivery is one thing. But when he came into it, he had this tone, this conviction. Okay, cool. It's not going to cancel you, I don't think. And I feel like money laundering, potentially. I don't want to play off of hypotheticals, but I'm just leaning towards that. You know, some of the things with the views in the world, there's some problem there. You know what I mean? So I get it, but then I can also see where, again, the mainstream far lefts are going to go, you know, get antsy, you know?
Well, the issue is, if you're really effective at lying to people and cultivating a feeling of virtue, that's the worst kind of person, right? If you, this is like the classic, like in a different situation, say you have a woman, she meets this guy, he's down on his luck, and she just believes in him. And she sees potential, and she sticks it out, and she loves him. But the whole time, she's getting him to sign everything in her name, and she's got a plan. The whole time, she's pretending to love him and just support him, but she's got a different plan, which is to take him for everything that he has. So that she gets him to agree to no prenups. She gets him to agree to put her name first on the house for whatever reason. She gets him to agree to all this, and then she leaves. Now, you might say, well, he's the fool for signing it. That doesn't make her not a horrible person for doing it to him in the first place, right? And I think any girl culture, like Cardi B being celebrated, is bad. Cardi B is a horrible example for women, right? She does antisocial, manipulative, nasty things to men. That's bad. I don't want to celebrate
But
her.
she's a part of the Matrix, though.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, you got to think about it,
what do
right?
you mean
Because
she's part of the Matrix?
No, because she's a part of the mainstream Matrix. And I feel like I would even say this, but you don't see these people want to come out and do interviews about this, because I've heard, again, the parts of the internet people get on their Google, you can actually see what's being said. And I feel like what they're looking to put as representations for women are not really the right people. I'm going to be honest, right? Mm-hmm. I came from the school of like Mother Teresa, Princess Diana, wholesome women that were doing courageous things in this world, right?
Right.
That were leaders in their industry. That's leadership. That's women leadership. That's them being in their feminine, being in their masculine throughout the day. But, you know, they go home, they do what they need to do. That's who you champion. That's who you have as your heroes. You know what I mean? But now we don't see it. I feel like it's like juggling now. We don't see it anywhere now. You know what I mean? And it's quite tough. And I think that's the reason why this youth is misguided. They don't have nobody to really look for. You know, I championed He-Man back in the day.
Yeah. I think as vacuous as masculinity has come to mean to our society, so has femininity. I would agree with that, right? Where are our Joan of Arcs, right? Where are our Deborahs? Where are our Wonder Womens, right? There's so many women that were strong and capable and intelligent and, most importantly, conducted themselves with moral character, right? Where are these characters? They don't exist. And I would say that's a sad thing, but the alternative shouldn't be AT is what we should like model our men after. It's like, it's the same shit. It's just like not popular in mainstream right now. But I'm no love of the mainstream either. I wouldn't sit here and be like, yeah, but like there's a good reason for why Cardi B is like a girl boss. Like I'd be like, no, it's toxic. The problem is she sells. It's capitalism. Like fundamentally, she sells money. Like convincing a bunch of women that they should be like maximally materialistic and hedonic is going to move makeup sales. It's going to move clothing sales. It's going to move Botox sales. It's going to move like all sorts of things. And like, and there's a left-leaning bias there. I won't even like pretend that there isn't. The issue for me with the manosphere specifically is I don't know why the alternative should be a vacuous version of masculinity. That doesn't seem any better.
Because it's, well, here, let's go into this, because now as somebody that's a content creator, podcaster, been in this space for 6 years, doing some things and really pushing out and making these connections, I see the guys that are in the manosphere, but they're not in the manosphere because they don't say that they're in the manosphere, and they bring strong talking points that challenges your mindset, but it doesn't come from a toxic point of view, right? I could go on a whole hit piece right now if I really wanted to and tell you all the guys that are the toxic side of masculinity. And it's a load of bull. You're going to act out there, right? Because I'm out in the spaces and, you know, being in the city where I'm at and things like that, and people know what you do. People see the networking moves that you're making. People can champion you and say, hey, listen, Rory's over there. He's doing some great things. But you know what? He's not coming from a misogynistic standpoint. He stands up for what he believes in. But at the same time, he will challenge certain things from certain people. And that's the Michael Jordan effect, I like to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's just what we need. And I feel like a lot of these content creators, like I said, I see people doing reaction vids to certain people, and I'm just like, okay, cool. But it's like, all you guys are doing is just stomping on each other, but there's no resolving of the situation and scenario, you know? So I feel like for you, that's why I look at somebody like yourself, strong platform, woman, and you're in this space as an influencer, as a YouTuber, whatever you want to call yourself, and you're championing men to be men and think, and you're championing women to be women and also think, to build it into greatness.
Yeah, I think I do more than that though. And this is gonna be the progressive part of me. I want men to feel comfortable being both masculine and feminine because there are good traits in both. And more importantly than that, I want them to be adults. I want them to be mature. I want them to contend with the world in a mature and ethical way, right? When I talk about women, I want women to be just as comfortable in their feminine as in their masculine, right? And I think feminism has done a lot of stuff of like pushing spaces open for women to engage in their masculine and still be like viewed as a good thing. There's some elements, even in the manosphere, of like a more masculine elements to a woman that they think is a good thing, right? Like I wouldn't have any traction in the manosphere if they didn't think some elements, because I'm quite spicy and direct and intense, right?
I couldn't tell.
Yeah. Which is, and most people look at that and they're like, that's based, right? That's fine. I want to see that happen for men, where like men can be like deeply compassionate and understanding, and other men go, what a respect-worthy man.
So that's the feminine side that I wanted to clear up.
That's the feminine side.
Thank you.
And then
Thank you.
maturity. Maturity has nothing to do with either. I don't think all good and bad traits are just masculine and feminine. Lots of them are just, most good and ethical traits are neither, is probably not gendered at all, right? Being competent is not gendered. Being ethical is not gendered, right?
Great. Well said. Holy. I feel like it goes even into where we're seeing the censorship in this space also too. Mm-hmm. And why is it happening?
I don't think it's this. It's hard to say. I think a lot of people want simple answers, right? They want to be like, it's the Matrix. It's the elite Silicon Valley trying to control our minds. I think it's more boring than that. And I think it's more pathetic than that. I think it's an element of Silicon Valley, right? I think a lot of like big tech and social media has kind of lumped in a central geographical location, but tends to be more liberal in general, right? So of course, in their worldview, they think they're right about things, right? And on their platforms, on their media, all these sorts of things, they champion those ideas, which is fine to do. That's like the basis of the American like political system, is that people should champion what they believe in, right? That's how you guys, that's a very American, because Canadians don't quite operate. Our political system doesn't operate that way.
So true. Yep.
And so they champion in it. And the problem is that a bunch of conservatives decided a long time ago that arts were silly and science and technology are scary. Particularly like this is back when conservatives was dominantly also like Christian religious, right? There's a lot of conservatives now that are secular that are branching into these fields again. So unsurprisingly, all the social media was run by liberal people. All of the mainstream media was run by liberal people because they went into the arts and they went into technology and they thought science was cool, right? So I don't think it's this like sinister thing as far as like this secret conspiracy matrix. I think what it is a lot of selfish people who've decided that they are in many ways religiously right about their progressive values, and they don't want to hear alternative things for all of their own religious reasons as to why it's really bad. And so they like try to crush it out of mainstream, which I would say is bad. It's a really, really bad thing. But like, God damn, like conservatives, like get on it. Like, why didn't you guys make competing like stars? Why didn't you guys make good music or good like media or anything that people can consume to like argue for your own values and make it like interesting and compelling? But that just like didn't really happen. So I think it's more simple and it's more commonly laid at the feet of like everything, which is like human brokenness, human fallibility, and selfishness.
Well said. Well said. Do you find it yourself hard with some of the talking points you bring to the general public? Because I feel like, and I'll use my thought process, being minority, talking about the things that you're talking about, people get triggered because it's a reflection inside of them, right? Yeah. Comes from a preconceived notion base. And I feel like when you're talking from a self-awareness perspective and you're not just throwing out things to make it stick to the wall like darts on a board, it challenges and it forces people to think. And you're not deemed as dangerous, but you're deemed as somebody where they're like, okay, wow, this is a man or a woman that has the ability to articulate themselves, but there's opposing challenges that they're wanting to see improve and change. How do you take that?
I think most, at least in my domain, we call them normies. Most normies are too busy to care. Most people are on autopilot. They don't want to hear about politics. Oh, on either side, by the way. Like, most normies are sick of the trans shit as much as they're sick of, like, conservatives hating gay people. Like, they're sick of all of it. They don't care. They're like, I don't care if trans kids exist. I don't really care at all. I just don't want to hear about it all the time. I don't care if you're gay at all. I just don't want to hear about it anymore. I just want to, like, go to work, do my job, watch my favorite shows, raise my kids, hang out with my family, talk about sports, right? That's most people. That's probably most consumers and viewers. And the issue is, I am incredibly bored with that. I don't care. There's nothing more uninteresting to me or like kind of like scary to me than like that life. But the issue is like most people just enjoy that. You know, my friend Brittany Simon would call them twos. Like they're just content in their own little bubble, doing their own little thing. And they're like kind of happy, but not super happy. I mean, it's the classic political question. How do you wake people up and get them to care enough to vote, right? Like so many of our problems wouldn't exist if voters actually held politicians accountable, but nobody even votes. So like, that's not going to happen.
But it's already pre-rigged though, to a degree.
I don't think there's evidence for that, right? I think there's corruption in the system, right? I think a lot of career, like the fact that there's like families of politicians is a little bit cringy to me for sure.
Oh, I'd say some stuff that would cancel us both, but I'm not going to.
Sure.
We'll talk when the button's not recorded, because this would go like far left and everything would just shut down in front of us.
So this idea that there's like institutional corruption, I agree. There is institutional corruption. The idea that it's like wholly rigged, it's only rigged insofar as that like most major politicians need to appeal to like a couple of stability boomers on either side because those are the only people who vote, and those people consistently will always vote for the same people. And then nothing really changes, but it doesn't really change because nobody cares, right? Nobody cares about Flint, Michigan, which has still got lead in its water, right? Nobody cares. It's been like 8 years. Nobody cares. If people just like actually made a stink about it for like a month straight, say 3 million people just kept getting mad about it, probably something would happen. But so like the idea like the system is rigged, it's like it's only rigged in as much as like everyone isn't really paying attention. Like nobody knows the platforms that you're voting for. Nobody even cares. Nobody contacts their MLAs. Nobody's very politically informed. Most people aren't voting, and people are particularly not voting locally, which is the most important way to be voting at all. And then we complain that like the system is corrupt and not reflecting our wishes. And it's like, of course not. You're not voting. Why would they reflect your wishes? You don't matter to them.
Where do you think the world right now as we see it is going? Because with all that's going on, right, people just need to type in Google or just turn on the news. I don't feel like there's a lot of things that are being covered, like that train wreck in Ohio. Yep. No major news. I find it weird at the time we're recording this. Things could potentially change. Where do you feel, because it's a lot of fear mongering going on, right? There's a lot. And so I don't watch the news anymore. I'm more check out your content, right? and I mean that 100%. Like, you check out your content, watch other things that are going to make you challenge and think, because you have to have a different view. And I like how you say it. It's like people don't care. They just want to live their regular life. Wake up, go to work, come home, spend time with their family, their loved ones, things like that. Cool. But I feel like there's a lot more. We got to push for a lot more. If you want to see change happen, you got to push for a lot more. What do you think in this next, let's go next 5 years? I know it's broad, but where do you think things are going to end up change?
I'm not sure. I'll tell you the stats on human prediction, okay? Humans, even so, if you take a bunch of clinical psychologists who are trained in forensic psychology, who are trained exclusively in determining the likelihood of somebody committing a crime, so somebody who's already criminal, how likely they're going to do a crime in the future, and then you just get them to guess, what do you think, based on, and you give them a bunch of information about the criminal. If they just are left to guess what their success rate is?
40%.
Less than 20%.
Jesus.
It's terrible.
Rough.
People are horrible at guessing things, which is why we need things like math and science, right? Because as soon as you give these professionals something called like an actuarial, which is like basically a mathematic way to predict recidivism, the likelihood of whether they can predict goes up to 80%, right? So me guessing where we'll be in 5 years, who knows?
Okay, let's
Because
go a
you never
year.
know
Let's
what
go a
great
year.
man will come.
Next year.
I suspect probably in the next year to 5 years, I wouldn't be surprised to see like major increasing riots breaking out. I think people are increasingly dissatisfied. There's greater division than there ever was before. People, I think, are getting radicalized at a higher level, and I think they're open increasingly to the idea of violence. I don't know if a civil war is like imminent in the next 5 years. I think people are very afraid of losing a democracy. As much as nobody wants to participate in their democracy, they also don't want to lose it because authoritarian regimes kind of suck.
As we're in Canada, I should ask you, maybe this would be a little fun before we get out of here. You liberal or conservative?
Doesn't matter. I think I vote for whose platform I support the most. So like locally, locally we get to vote like on multiple positions. So I voted for a conservative who had a really, really good policing policy. I voted for an educator who was liberal. I voted for NDP. It's usually between these three. I've usually never liked the Green Party for much. I just find that their platforms are very like empty.
Small.
So yeah, provincially, I voted conservative, I voted liberal, and I voted NDP. Nationally, I voted conservative, I voted NDP, I have voted liberal, and I have voted to actively abstain from voting as well. So I'm all over the map. I'm a true radical centrist.
No, I can see that. I can see that.
You can't peg me. You don't know where I'll be.
No, I like that.
Too quick.
What's next for you? If you had the forecast for yourself, right? You have great content, right? I'll say that. Like I catch, the tidbits that I can see from time to time. And I want to champion you because you have some good, strong talking points. And I feel like there needs to be more women in the YouTube space dominating this realm because you're challenging men and women to think. Can't just be one-sided and have men just run the world on that side. You know what I mean? Because I want to see.
That's very fourth wave feminist of you, Rory. Oh my goodness.
What's that?
I said that's very fourth wave feminist of you, Rory.
That's me calling it the way I need to call it.
Hey, it's true. Fourth wave feminism, especially by there's a lot of black women leading it, is actually pretty based. It's super cool.
Yeah, and because the thing is, I see both sides, right? But then when it comes down to it, I make my point, and I hit it the nail on the head. What's next for you when it comes down to your channel and what you're going to be championing for the next year?
I'm really passionate about getting academics out of their ivory tower, talking to lay people, and teaching academics how to not be boring. Because academics are so boring to listen to, always, because they're always hedging their statements. The issue is that's really hard to do, hence my last cancellation. It's hard to be an academic and come into this space because if you have something to lose and somebody thinks your opinion's bad, they could go after your professional job, and universities are cowards and they will just drop people rather than deal with a little bit of negative PR for a week. It's very cringe. So we'll see where that goes. I just recently, I don't know if you caught my stream yesterday, but I talked to the most prestigious psychological researcher who is alive today. Like, I can't underscore how big of a deal and what a big celebrity crush. Like, I don't have celebrity crushes, okay? I have researcher crushes.
Not one celebrity crush.
I just like research. I'm a sapiosexual though. Like if somebody does like, oh, look at that factorial analysis, like, I love that shit.
So you're telling me there's not one person that you would rant and rave over just to bring on your channel? Sorry,
like a normal celebrity.
Anybody. It could be. Listen, okay. You know what? How I'll say this is, influencers and YouTubers are the new celebrity, right?
That's true.
Some of them are A-list, sure. Some of them are B-list, but there's got to be that one.
I'd love to talk to Jordan Peterson. I wanna have a deep heart to heart. I want to wag my finger at him a little bit and then tell him, where he's valuable and ask him why he's so bitter right now.
I think that'd be one of them.
I understand why he's so bitter, but yeah.
No, but I think that'd be one of them cool conversations. I don't want to be a fly on the wall for that one.
We'll see. Who knows if I'll ever. You'll have to tell me, Roy. I've noticed that streamers like me more than viewers do a lot of the time. Like almost every other content creator I meet is like, I really appreciate you. Maybe because I'm not like, I don't know what it is.
No, because.
But then viewers are like, this dumb bitch, I hate her. Which is
so I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest with you. With me, I do a lot of vetting, right? For the last 6 years being in this, like when podcasting just came out, right? And now transitioning and bringing it over to like the YouTube space, the TikTok space. I see that everybody has their way that they know how to connect. Yeah. You're real. I don't want to say authentic because authentic is a buzzword and it's ugly now.
That's true.
But you're real and you have a charismatic ability about you that's gripping and you know how to handle yourself. I've seen you have some conversations with some dudes and I'm sitting here, I'm like, yo, she counterpunching a lot of you guys. She rope-a-doping you in some of these conversations. And I don't think that men see that. And that's why we need to champion people like you to really just keep going, I can't see why you can't talk to Jordan Peterson. Your platform's there.
Yeah, I gotta get those numbers, but yeah, I would love to.
Is it about numbers, though?
I think so. We've reached out to Kyla, like, twice. I'm just gonna keep bugging her though. We'll just keep trying. One day I'll get there.
All you gotta do is keep knocking on the door. Trust me. Be surprised.
Yep. True. Yep.
Where can everybody check you out, right? And everything you got going on.
Yeah. So my name is not so erudite. Not so together, like not and so, and then erudite is spelled ERUDITE. That's YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Twitch. I think that's it. That's probably it. Yeah, those locations. Yeah.
So not so erudite. What made you just come with that?
Oh, that's all. My husband is the aesthetic genius. In fact, my hair color, his idea. Much of my aesthetic is his idea. I mean, the makeup's my idea because I'm a boss queen at makeup. But we were just coming up with some nicknames, and I was telling him nicknames I had in the past, and he hated all of them. He was like, these are terrible. It was like Bambi, and he's like, no, people are just going to think you're a titty streamer. Don't do Bambi. And I was like, okay. I had Scout, and he was like, that's also weird.
You had to put like one of them things like Dragon Ball Z like right there if you're going to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And so he was like, what do you think about erudite? Because we wanted something that was like feminine, but kind of captured me pretty well, which was like, I'm decently feminine, but I'm kind of spicy and I'm like very nerdy. Like I'm just like a very big intellectual type, right? So I liked it, but I felt I was like, well, I don't really want to go around calling myself erudite, like being like, because it means scholarly and learned. So I just didn't want to be like, I'm so scholarly and learned. That's my name. And he was like, I knew you were going to say that. So how about not so erudite? We can make puns off of it. It can be very memey.
Merch.
You can make merch. We can do other brands, right? Not so company, not so fitness, which is what like we've branched into. We have not so merch and not so fitness and stuff like that. So yeah, I was like, that's a really good name, and it stuck. And it's an incredible name. I don't claim any ownership of it, other than like obviously it's my name, but like it's all Nick's brainchild.
No, and I like that. I like that originality, right?
Yeah,
it's good.
He's very good at naming things. It's
good. Maybe I should pay him some money on the back end to make some names for me.
He's actually like so many like of the things, like every now and then I'll just have like a 6 week straight where I just come up with new ideas for their content, and like spit it all out. He's an idea man. He can just like sit down with content creators and like be like, you should do this. This should be your niche. This should blah, 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 and he's like fucking right about all of it. It's incredible. He needs to get into consultation. I try to tell him that.
Why doesn't he?
Well, the issue is that all he has on his resume right now is my channel. So it's just like, how do we charge for it? Who do we ask? How do we brand ourselves? He's trying to start a personal training company. So
he got it, man. He's got it. You know what I mean? So he's got the island blood in him. He'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, he likes giving ideas and then having other people do the work. But he comes up with really, really good ideas. So
No, absolutely. Well, I do appreciate you. Do appreciate this conversation. And I know the audience are gonna like parts of the conversation. They just need to keep challenging themselves, you know, and all that good stuff. So I do appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Do you want me